by using AI, we never held the belief that AI is going to replace people. AI is just a tool, so they can do more within a day. Humans are social animals. When everybody is trying to pay attention to communicating with a machine, I think the scarce resources is the human part.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to WIT, which is What I Think. I'm here with Arthur Lee of Chemical.ai. So I'm writing a screenplay about AI, and I was introduced to him through a good friend, Johnson Chang from Cornell University. And I wanted to tap into all the knowledge that he has on the ground about artificial intelligence and Chemical.ai. I encourage you to research further about his company and who he is. And so we're just going to jump into some of these topics. But first, Arthur, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing this show with me. If you could give the audience a brief summary of what you're up to in AI and then what you've done in the past, and then we'll jump into more about AI.
Yeah, certainly. Good to see you again, Derek. I don't know how you find the time to do the podcast while you're still busy with all the directing, acting, and stuff. So good to see you again, definitely. I think we talked about AI in the past about a few weeks ago, so it's good to reconnect. So right now I work for a company called Chemical.ai. Well, as the name suggests, it's a company at the intersection of chemistry and artificial intelligence. So what the company does is to basically use machine learning and artificial intelligence to help chemists to more effectively plan for synthesis. Right. So if a chemist would like to make a molecule that has never been made before, currently they have to go through all the literature, read all the books, rely on their network to find ways to make the molecule. But with chemical AI tool, they're able to get different options and ideas of how to make the chemical within just a few minutes. So in a nutshell, that's what we do at the Chemical AI. As for myself, I lead the growth for Chemical AI in North America as well as Europe. So my entire journey of my career has been in the field of AI, but I have to note that the most coding I have done is the extent of CS50, the online course in programming. So I myself is not an expert in terms of coding, programming, or finding the best transformer, etc. But I am a scientist by training. I'm a chemist, but by profession, I am a business person. So I've been doing business development, marketing, and growth functions for startups ever since. So Chemical AI is actually the third startup. Previously, I worked at different two startups, both involved in AI. One is called Blue Dot. They use machine learning to survey the entire landscape of social media, news across different languages to find a potential infectious disease. So if you think about like past 5 years, though, there was a very famous disease, right? That's COVID-19. And the Blue Dot was actually one of the first companies that notified the world there is something unusual across the WeChat platform. Right. So that was a very interesting project. And then before that, my very first company after my business school was a AI drug discovery company. In a nutshell, it just used machine learning to design molecules, and that molecules can be used to be further developed into medicines. So the idea is to make the drug discovery much faster than the traditional way. I've only worked in the startups, and coincidentally, every single one of them was involved with AI.
Well, what I love is that, especially if you're in that startup atmosphere, is that you probably have to do everything and wear many hats. And that leads to a lot of experience. I'm curious, when you're trying to figure out to alert people about an infectious disease, I'm sure there are the number of variables that you have to consider and kind of filter out the noise. What was that like?
Interesting you bring up this topic. In fact, by using AI across all the startups I've worked with, we never held the belief that AI is going to replace people. To your question, when we need to filter out the noise to get a signal of infectious diseases, we actually had to rely on epidemiologists in-house, right, to filter out the noise. In that case, AI is just a tool that can help the epidemiologist to filter out noises much, much faster so they can do more within a day. So that's a good point. To actually filter out the noise, you have to use some level of human intelligence as well.
I love your work experience because it's like how to find it and then how to detect it. And then now the juncture you're at right now is how to make it, how to make things with AI, specifically in the medical field using, chemical analysis and things like that, probably way beyond any kind of education that I have. But certainly like that gives you a lot more insight into, what's going to happen in the future, I think. So one of the things I love to ask my guests is, given your work experience and your history, what is your definition of AI?
Yeah, you asked me, and I've asked my wife, who is trained as a statistician. And really, to her, AI is just I would say, more elegant or fancier word for statistical modeling. So all of the, let's say, neural network, they're all based on different ways of building statistical models, how to branch out the decision tree, etc. Ultimately, it's math. I think AI got a lot of attention because the cost of computational resources has reduced dramatically. So the computational power and the capacity of many applications or mathematical calculations have exploded exponentially. So a lot of applications we start to see by using AI become more and more relevant to our human life. So even for my current company, Chemical.ai, the idea of using mathematics or statistics to suggest how to make a compound is not new. The idea was developed in 1960s by Dr. E.J. Corey, who won the Nobel Prize. At that time, there was the rise of semiconductor. So there was a boom of computational resource. So right now, there's a second boom, I think. So it is the availability and accessibility of computational power that really brought the statistical modeling to more practical and relevant aspects of our daily life, such as the ChatGPT, right, the chatbot, etc., like self-driving cars. You cannot imagine self-driving cars many, many years ago. Maybe you have to store like, 50 kilograms of processor on the car. That's just not possible. Right now, you can do that on the phone. So yeah, I think the statistical part of AI has always been there. It just right now, it has come much, much closer to us as regular people. So that would be my view of AI. It's really just statistics.
A little bit about me. I did study statistics at Cornell University for my undergrad, but that was way back. And I don't remember much of it. I just remember everyone was smarter than me. So that's why I don't necessarily do it. But I do make guesses a lot. So I'd like to say that. That's an intriguing perspective on what AI is. What type of models are typically being used? Is it like a Black-Scholes, which is maybe applied to financial AI? Or like how intricate are these statistical models?
In our case, Chemical.ai, we try to build models that really mimic how human chemists think about a chemical reaction. So again, it may appear sophisticated concept like machine learning or deep learning. In essence, what we are really trying to do is to find, I say, a bunch of data partially supporting your claim, and the other parts will be refusing a claim. And then that will give you a probability of certain aspects. And that aspect can be a key consideration, for example, chemical reaction. So when you look at a chemical reaction, you will consider there are many things, functional group compatibility or side reactions, things like that. So what we are trying to build is a collection of those models backed by statistics. And those models were actually considered by humans as a part of their intuition. Like when you and I, like we have our own profession, maybe Derek, in your field, it's about filming or directing. Maybe when you write a story, you will consider the main character, right? Or the climax of a story. Those are the intuition you have developed. Same to me. I have my profession. So we're really trying to build like machine learning models that can extract data, and all of those data, some will support the model, some will be rejecting the model, what it's trying to predict, and then try to mimic what a human thinks about throughout the process.
While they talk about, the LLMs and how much data has to parse through, still going back to thinking when I was studying statistics, like we used Mathematica in MATLAB, and I swear just any of those calculations took like, sometimes you would just punch in, a simple formula and that would take like a day and you'd have to come back and find out what like there was. And it was just a simple equation. So I can imagine now how things have doubled in power every year, just to do a simple survival model is now it might be instantaneous, but most of us are probably impatient. Most of us are probably like, it's taking too long. I've been exploring like script writing software for AI and it's impressive. But to your point, my current feeling is like, you still got to know your stuff. If you don't, then a lot of the stuff that it gives you is pretty useless. ridiculous and repetitive in a way.
Yeah, I actually wonder how the students in the same class where you said before, how they are doing their homework now. Could they be just using ChatGPT to get answer? I'm actually genuinely intrigued by how the education is currently being delivered with the existence of so many powerful tools, even the essay writings. I don't know if you have any knowledge about that. I haven't been back to school, but I'm very curious about that aspect.
I think any of the technology, there's the temptation to use it whenever you can versus just doing it yourself. It could really come down to like the calculator. Like, should you memorize your times tables or should you just show your kid how to use a calculator? As basic as that thought process. My opinion is that certainly you can't just ignore it. You can't ignore the technology. I think it's really important that the teachers are able to distinguish. So maybe there needs to be some education behind that as well. Like, hey, this stuff is just created by the computer. Like, go back and do it or I'll fail you. There weren't just so many different ethical questions. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about AI in the classroom? Like, should kids be able to use it? What age?
Great question. I also have young kids. When I don't know a particular answer, now I try to tell my kid, you can just ask Google. Like you said, we cannot ignore the technology development. I think without teaching the kids how to best use the tool, they will probably fall behind. The whole point is to make them more productive as a human being in the future so they can create value for themselves or for the society. So I think AI is an inevitable tool to achieve that, right? But this also reminds me of the earlier stories when washing machines were first invented, right? I think at that time, there was the belief that humans will get so much free time after dinner. But in fact, with washing machines, people just get even busier. They find other things to do. So I think if technology allows our kids to, I say, automate or certain tasks to be outsourced, I think it might be a good thing for the mankind. It just overall, the productivity will easily increase by, 10% or 20% if we are able to adopt those tools. So that will be my take. I'll educate my kids using those tools responsibly.
The great thing in speaking to you about the value and importance, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what are the, the inroads and the things that you guys are doing at Chemical AI that are, in the medical industry. Like, that's an exciting arena because you can potentially save people's lives. But what does that mean to you? Like, what are the things that's going on right now that could help us break through and solve problems we've never been able to solve before?
Yeah, I think the next big opportunity in chemistry field particularly, probably I want to stay within the chemistry field because the medical field is so broad and wide. We can spend 10 episodes talking about those. So just in the chemistry field, I think the next breakthrough is by using the automation. There are like humanoids, robots that can grab let's say a flask and shake it. There can be computer vision that can tell whether a reaction has already been completed. All those technologies are already there. So I think the next breakthrough will be certain groups of teams or companies finding a solution to put all those existing technologies together in a lab setting to make chemistries or make medicines. Right. So I used to be trained as a chemist. In order for me to design and execute an experiment, particularly over a period of time, I had to be there. So in my graduate school at the University of Toronto, sometimes I had to stay overnight because I had to use a dissolution test, which is a device that has a liquid inside and there is a paddle that stirs it to see how much the drug will dissolve. And you have to take samples in, let's say, half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, until 24 hours. Right. So in that case, I had to stay in the lab. But right now, that kind of tedious and mundane task can be automated very, very easily. So I think the lab experiments can be automated by using a lot of existing technology. A lot of technologies have already been applied in different fields, such as even cooking. I think this might be just a attention grabbing or clickbait kind of articles or videos. We have seen like a robotic arm holding a spatula, frying things right in a wok. That kind of technology is already there. So we just need to bring everything into the lab, into a more delicate, more customized setting to make medicines. So think about my example of doing my experiment like 15 years ago. I had to spend 24 hours doing one experiment with robotics and automation. I was already seeing certain cases. People can do thousands of reactions in just one single day. Discovering medicine is a numbers game. So you have to synthesize tens of thousands or millions of compounds in order to find the one magical blockbuster. That's typically how drugs are found. The faster you get to that number, the faster the medicine will shall arrive to the patient.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, you're essentially running simulations like at a mass scale, mass production, and more precise because I was
Yeah,
terrible at, I mean, you're measuring, like,
you're right.
I mean,
Yeah,
even any of those things are just like, it could just go wrong.
exactly. What if I
Um,
was still deprived and I just doubled the dose, right? That can have serious results. Yeah.
That's pretty mind-boggling. Could you synthesize something, let's say, in a few minutes even? Like, let's say you wanted to create a certain compound. How fast could something be synthesized these days using robotics and some sort of laboratory setup that way?
Yeah, for simple reactions, yeah, it can happen very quickly, seconds or minutes. So that's what's happening in the flask. But before everything come to the flask, and after that, there's still a lot of things where automation and AI can help to optimize. For example, before chemists put things in the same reaction flask, for example, they
Mhm.
still need to call someone to buy it, right? They need to call the vendor. They need to wait for the shipping. They need to measure the content. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And after the reaction, there's still the analysis or detection to see whether the reaction has been completed, whether there is any impurities or side reactions. So let me put it in a different way. The time we are able to reduce by using like machine learning or AI or automation, it is still finite because you can only, for example, save 2 hours in a single experiment. However, the parallel opportunity is massive. So with the machines or robotics, you can do thousands, hundreds of experiments at the same time. By doing one experiment using a machine, it's the same by doing 100 experiments. So that part has been unlocked for chemists or for scientists.
Yeah, I mean, and how adaptive, maybe through machine learning, let's say like you're iterating with simulations, would the AI be able to adjust the experiment on the fly for you?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I think that's where the next breakthrough will be. So right now in a lab setting, everything has to be customized and controlled. You have to measure how far this bench, right, to that bench and where each plate is placed. Maybe there are 96 well plates. So they have their own location, they have their own distance, their own diameter of the device. So everything is controlled and measured. It's still very different from, let's say, a Tesla driving on the road. You put a Tesla on any road, whether there are two people around you or 20 people around you, the machine is able to tell. It is more universal and generalizable in the case of a Tesla, but it is very less so in a lab setting. But as you point out how adaptive it is, I think there will be a huge breakthrough when both software and hardware are ready. I think right now we're at the breaking point. There are certain soft hardware already out there being very versatile. I was in Las Vegas 2 months ago. There were just like driverless robotic taxis running around. So the technology is already there. And on the software part, someone has to do the work to connect every device or to program how to do a lab experiment. So I think the time is almost there. It's going to be a very exciting, maybe next 1 to 3 years.
Well, okay, I have a question. You know how in the beginning it could really work really well, and then of course you continue to feed a model data. Is there a point where it's like the data actually makes the whole decision model worse? And how often does that happen?
Yeah, the quality and the distribution of data is very important. In the science world, actually, it's highly biased. It's biased towards the positive data. So a lot of the training models in science, in medical fields, are based on publications, right? People don't talk about their field work, particularly in these days. In the old days, yeah, people still talk about the field experiments and then actually spend time trying to understand why the experiment failed. And there's value in learning that. I don't know, maybe people get more impatient right now. I just want to publish the next paper. I need to pause the result. So whatever has already been failed, I don't care anymore. That seems to be the current trend. People don't publish a lot of negative data. And aside from the psychology of like trying to be high achievers, always trying to look for the next carrot. Aside from that reason, particularly in the science field, it's also very hard to explain why something failed. There can be many reasons let's say a chemistry experiment can fail. Also, practically, it's very hard for people to understand why certain things failed. So due to the multiple reasons, it's very hard to get a balanced data set. So a lot of training data are just positive data. And in many cases, people have to artificially make negative data just to assume a random data will be meaningless in a biological world. So like you said, when you feed the data, you have to feed responsibly. It's always garbage in and garbage out. So if you have a well-equipped team that can generate a lot of good judgment, they should be able to tell what kind of data you should feed to the model. Otherwise, like people are just doing a disservice to the hard work they have already put in.
I want to go further on that, but I have another question. Dosage, for example, is that something that where chemical AI can really help? Because for those with aging parents, medications, there's all different shapes and sizes and races and cultures. Is there a role for chemical AI to play in that as well? Just because, I mean, currently it's usually like 3 different doses and, they just kind of have a wide spectrum of for one person, the range can be. Is there somewhere that chemical AI can aid in that as well?
Not necessarily chemical AI, because right now the company is mainly focused on chemical reactions. However, the question is very relevant to my graduate school, maybe 10 to 15 years ago. It's really a question about different formulations that can give patients more options to take, right? Either to improve their compliance, they don't forget taking their medicines, or to improve their convenience, they can just maybe stick a patch on their shoulder and they can forget about it. So to give you one example, my graduate school research project was actually a project to improve the solubility of a drug. It's an antifungal drug to treat infections, fungal infections. A very common fungal infection is the athlete's feet, right? So the feet can get really itchy, the nail can get deformed because of the fungal. So there are different ways of treating this disease. One is to take pills. Because that drug is so insoluble, it basically does not dissolve in water. You have to take a lot of that drug in order to have a meaningful concentration of the medicine in your blood. And then you have to wait for that concentration to pass to the toenail in order to make the drug effective to kill the fungus. So we have to think about other ways to deliver the molecule on that drug, because taking a high dose of that drug, which is called itraconazole, is going to have side effects. Right? I had to think about a way how to, for example, apply that drug just on the toenail itself. For example, just like a nail lickers or a patch on top of it or cream. So my research was actually in delivering that drug through the toenail. So the first difficult problem I had to solve is to increase the solubility of the drug. So we found a way, but the rest is really just a thesis. But you brought up a question about the dosage forms or administrative routes. That is very important, particularly right now. There are so many diseases that are long-term, like diabetes, high blood pressure. It's just very disheartening to think about for the rest of my life or one's life, he or she may need to take that medication forever until the day they have to pass away. So there is actually a big industry about the dosage forms or formulation that can be improved by using machine learning. There's already a lot of companies. It's just chemical AI is not one of them. I think there is a huge market there. Believe it or not, many times we have spent billions of dollars, tens of years, finding all the molecules, synthesizing all of them, feeding them to all the mice, and arriving to human in clinical trials. But we could not find the best way to deliver it. There is going to be a formulation problem, and many projects were killed because of that. So the formulation is actually at the end of the drug development stage. You have to go through all the pain and the costly experiments, reaching the final stage. Okay, I know this molecule works. Now, how do I give that to the patients? If you cannot find a way of doing that effectively, well, the project is still killed, unfortunately. So that's a big, big loss. On the other side, there's also big opportunity, maybe to rescue certain failed drugs because of the formulation issue.
Fascinating. That's a good segue into the dangers of AI. But before we go there, I mean, I think one of the greatest arguments out there is about the efficiency of AI in terms of, basically you're using computing power, which is highly dependable on how much energy versus, what's computed. I think the field that you're in is very justifiable, like that we should be spending our resources that way to save people's lives. So I'd be curious about your opinion on that, like sort of how many trees or how much coal is being used to, let's say, solve one experiment or one issue and then kind of expanding on that. I don't think it has to be hard numbers, but it's just more like, is it really that costly in terms of energy? Because I think, some people will say, well, hey, that's all great, but how many trees are you going to cut down, or how much coal do you need to burn, or do you need your own private nuclear reactor just to solve one issue,
Yeah, the only thing I can tell is that computational costs, the capability of computing has been increased a lot, but because of so much attention to AI, to actually acquire the computing resources that are suitable for training AI models has not dropped significantly. I was trying to look for certain graphic card from NVIDIA, the RTX 4800, something like that, and I couldn't find anything. I could only find on eBay, which was selling like a twice of the MSRP. I think there are hoarders because of such a high attention to AI. There are hoarders that are just keeping all those valuable graphic cards to themselves and resell them at a different price. I know this is not a direct answer to the energy question, right? But I think the energy question applies to all kinds of fields beyond AI. Even we just think about how do we build houses, right? Develop different economic opportunities. It is a universal question. Do we cut trees to grow, or do we use more cleaner energy, such as like nuclear power in Ontario? So there's a lot of hydro power. A lot of these discussions are dependent on the regulation. I'm in Canada, so Canada has one of the largest freshwater reserve. It also has, I think it's the number 3 largest reserve of oil. It has probably one of the largest reserve of wood and trees. So there's a lot of natural resources. But due to policy issues or all kinds of issues, the life in Canada is actually not cheap. So I think the question you asked was a great question. Does not only apply to AI, but in just developing anything in general. Everything will take energy. Even building electric cars will take energy as well. It's a massive question. I think it can also get to the ethics pretty soon, like how much do we sacrifice for the future just for today? I don't have an answer to that. I think that's a very big question. Right now, there's a lot of a political, like a shifted movement, whether we should unlock certain natural resources. I think we're all paying attention to what's happening in the States. So it is still a very heated question for both parties to debate. There's a pro-environment party, and there's also like a pro-economic development party.
I definitely want to ask you about DeepSeek, if you know anything about it or have an opinion on it. It looks as if one of the selling points is that it is essentially much cheaper to use and requires less energy and was developed a lot cheaper. But there's obviously arguments against it too as well. So just curious briefly what you think about it and your opinion.
Yeah, it's certainly been very hot lately, given the timing. I am not able to dive into the code to understand technically how different it is from other tools out there. But just in general, as a regular person who is in this field, I use technology in my daily life. I think having more options and high quality options is always a good thing for our regular consumers. So I feel that a lot of criticism, this is what I saw on the news. Maybe it also depends what kind of news sources I got them from. A lot of criticism are coming from OpenAI. I feel that OpenAI certainly feels threatened by the emergence of DeepSeek. So there's also the topic of Elon Musk trying to buy or made an offer to OpenAI. I think just as a consumer, we always appreciate more options. We don't want Tesla to be the only viable electric car in the same way that we don't want OpenAI to be the only chatbot or usable software out there. So I think it's important to introduce competition. There can be potentially geopolitical reasons why DeepSeek was being developed. Talking about the example of me trying to get graphic cards from NVIDIA. When I talk with a few friends in China who are in the field of AI startups, they couldn't get the graphic card at all because the graphic card was on an export ban. So there's all the geopolitical issues of the US trying to maybe maintain its competitive edge over other competitors. So the rise of DeepSeek, I think, is a good thing for normal people in general. It may not be the best thing for OpenAI, depending how it thinks about it. I don't know how Apple feels about Android being around, but as a consumer, I definitely don't want to just having Apple as the only option for me to go forward. Another personal note is that I was born in China, so I certainly feel proud that Chinese community is able to come up with innovative solutions that is usable to the humankind. I think a lot of the Chinese products, particularly on the software, are very, very good. For example, TikTok, right? And now the DeepSeek.
China is very sophisticated. For example, just the cashless system there is just so convenient. And I remember there people were talking about all the TikTokers that went over to Xiaohongshu, Little Red Book, and people seeing like how affordable things were, a lot of the basics. So there are a lot of things that are being done right in China. So it's something that everyone should be looking at as well and see how, for artificial intelligence, how we can really make use of it for the greater good. Well, I mean, you brought up OpenAI and Elon Musk. What did you think about him? Do you think he's like serious about it? And what does that really mean? Like, why does he want it?
I read the book about him, but certainly I cannot get into his mind. I don't know how he finds all the time and the ideas. I think he just became the number one Diablo 4 player in the world. It's just crazy. I think he wants to buy it, in my opinion, is to avoid the concentration of power. Right now, the AI is getting so much attention, so much investment. I think SoftBank just invests tens or hundreds of billions into the AI industry. I think any sort of concentration of power can be detrimental at the end. I simply believe that human nature should not be challenged. There is always the greed component if there is concentration of power. If OpenAI is the only company that can dominate the industry with the support of Microsoft and all kinds of other financial backers, it's going to understandably squeeze out other competitors, including DeepSeek, or not even mention the startups. It will, I don't know, maybe acquire all the maybe graphic cards, right? It will hoard all of them. And other startups will find it very difficult to get into the space. And ultimately, it's going to be a monopoly at the end. So I know Elon Musk, originally when he started OpenAI, he wanted to build the open concept in the name of OpenAI, right? So right now there's a meme and jokes talking about OpenAI is actually the closed AI, right? So that is a direction I don't think the consumers will benefit from. So I don't know if he wanting to buy it is because he wants to give the power or decentralize the power of the OpenAI. If that's the motivation, I think it's going to be a good thing. If he is buying it for his consideration of power, and then I think it's a bad thing.
Let's segue into the dangers of AI, because I know you are recently a part of opcw.org.
Yeah.
Tell me, what that is, what that means, and anything more about it.
Yeah, so OPCW is a organization that has the mission of preventing chemical weapons. So it has a lot of state members. I think 3 nations are now part of the organization. Its main goal is to eliminate the danger of chemical weapons. AI has been a very hot topic in its committee meetings, and I was lucky to be a part of it, supporting their scientific advisory board as a part of the educational groups, trying to bring the most updated development of AI to the committee member. So that was my involvement in it. And there are topics about how automation or retrosynthesis, both of which are part of chemical AI, how these kind of technologies can be used against the humankind, right, in the context of chemical weapons. So if you think about how can bad actors use the tools such as the ones we developed against humankind, let's say if they want to make a neural agent or they want to make certain explosives. In the past, it will take them a lot of time. Right now, there are tools available. As a commercial company, we of course, have a list of prohibited chemicals that can be searched. So you will never find those chemical weapons or their prerequisites in our platform. However, we just talk about the open and the closed AI. There are also open source tools out there which can be easily accessed. So they don't have to go through anything as long as someone can code, understand databases, they can run it. Interestingly, one of my friends was talking with me earlier this week. He said he was banned on OpenAI for 6 months. I asked, what did you search? And he said he was searching certain neural agent, right? And OpenAI maybe thought he's trying to start something. So he was banned for 6 months. So it speaks to the potential danger of having such powerful tools, right? OPCW wants to understand the opportunities as well as the dangers AI can impose on the chemical weapons. Right? We talk about the danger. Maybe the bad actors can identify innovative approach to make weapons. But on the positive side, the good actors or regulators can also use those tools to understand which potential prerequisite can be used so that they will start to investigate those prerequisites more proactively. So there's always good and bad. There's a lot of regulation in discussion. Then it becomes a debate between how much do you want to regulate AI and you want to regulate startups, because the worst enemy for innovation is regulation. It's a very complicated topic, and I believe over 170 nations representatives among the group, and it's almost impossible to get everybody to agree on a single thing. Right. I'm lucky to be at the front row of that kind of discussion. So I'm also very interested to see how things evolve. Maybe there's never going to be a perfect answer. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, I'm glad someone as balanced as you is there, at least, keeping an eye on things and speaking out when necessary. And this may be public knowledge, but maybe to the common person, not. So let's take OpenAI, right? This guy, he searched on what a neural agent is and then suddenly got bounced or just suspended from school. Who determines that, since it's an open source software, right? Like, what group of people, or how is that even determined? Like, what are threats and what are fine?
That's the same question, maybe same concern Elon Musk had when he bought Twitter, right? Who decides that? What is the solution? Right now, Elon Musk thought maybe community node is a solution to it, right? It works to a certain extent. And the question you just asked speaks exactly to the danger of maybe having OpenAI as the only viable solution to the public who would like to use AI. So there is danger of concentration to power. Again, I mentioned earlier, we should never underestimate the human nature, particularly on the greed part. I don't know what the best approach is, but certainly we should watch out for any like a dominant player, monopolies. Things usually don't go well when certain industries go to that direction. So in a sense, I don't know if Elon Musk is able to buy OpenAI, or it's just a signal or a advocating voice to raise people's awareness. There is certain danger if there is concentration of power. So other people can start to think about this topic. I think like Trump talks about buying Canada. Is he serious? Is that a signal or is that a noise? Right? He successfully did raise Canadians' awareness of having Canada as a sovereign nation. So we always thought about living in Canada as everything taken granted because there's a trading partner there. Now everything can change, right? With Trump's voice, we start to realize that, hey, we're actually so dependent on our neighbors. We have to think about like how we utilize our massive natural resources. So right now there's talks about different provinces within Canada should trade with each other. So do you know that the west part of Canada, there's a lot of oil, but that part of oil is never shipped to Eastern Canada. It's always shipping to the US and then back to Canada East. So there's a lot of seemingly logical things because the previous government did not allow different provinces to collaborate to build a pipeline across Canada. Now, the talk is back on the table, right? Because of what? It's because of Trump talking about buying Canada. Maybe that's never a real thing, but it makes people think about a lot of options that were put aside because people just take the current state for granted. Similar to Elon Musk, I don't know if he wants to raise his voice using a seemingly outrageous claim. He wants to buy OpenAI, but maybe his goal is just to make people be aware that there is danger of concentration of power. I don't think he is a person who likes the concentration of power or monopoly, even though he is a businessman. When he developed Tesla, he made all the Tesla patents available to everyone. That really elevated the EV industry, right? When the water rises, all the boats will rise as well. So I cannot get into his mind, but my hopeful thinking is that he's trying to do something for the better humankind.
Yeah, I remember our first conversation was like the night before the elections in the city. So we were joking around, and maybe in a lot of people's minds it was very definitive who was going to win, but to me I really wasn't sure. I could not tell. I guess certainly like just whatever the US does and who's leading does make a difference, and especially in your industry as well. We're living in a new world.
Right.
Well, I have a couple more questions. If I'm a teenager right now, which would be great to be a lot younger. I don't know about teenager, actually, maybe a little older than that. But anyway, for the teenagers out there right now who are thinking about going to college, let's say, how can they prepare for, let's say, like a career in AI? Because actually, if you think about it, like some of the stuff that you've done is really early and before AI is like a big thing, as big as it is now. What can kids be doing now to prepare themselves for the future? Because my personal feeling is that AI is pretty inevitable anyway, because it's already with us and we're already utilizing it. It's just the level right now. But, what can they do to prepare?
I think about this very frequently because I am also a father with kids. I think about how we should educate our kids. And my mind may shift, but my current experience and conclusion is that when everybody is trying to buy a single stock, maybe you should consider the other way, right? So if everybody is looking at AI or using digital tools and the computer science major has been extremely hot in the past few years, probably in the next few years to come, people are thinking about AI and that's how they can get a job at Meta. But at the same time, Meta just cut 5% of their employee count, right? So when everybody's thinking about how I can communicate with computer, how I can code, I think we should go back to the first principle. Humans are social animals. When everybody is trying to pay attention to communicating via or with a machine, I think the scarce resources is the human part. The communication skills or the social skills, that is going to be sought after when AI becomes the standard skill set in the future. Humans are social animals. People still need to collaborate. I think people I enjoy working the most or people I aspire to be, they are all very great people. They know how to navigate complicated social settings. They are very good with their enemies as well as their friends. So I think that kind of skills are the ones that make humans human rather than humans trees or monkeys. So I think we should always go back to the first principle in the time of uncertainty and ambiguity, because that kind of social skills and social capabilities are what keeps human propagating to the world. I think there's a lot of distractions right now. It's very hard to predict what the next 20 years will be like. But if I need to bet on something with my child's future, I would think still learn how to speak English or speak any language you find useful, Spanish, anything, but also learn how the world works in terms of physics, math. All those things are the fundamentals of building a future. By having that kind of solid fundamental knowledge and skills, should not go wrong. Even you don't know anything about AI, but you are really good with people, there's always space for you, right? If you're a teenager. So I don't think anybody should have the fear of missing out if AI is not part of their curriculum or career plan yet, or AI is simply not interest to them, because ultimately you have to deal with people. And what I feel the most joyful thing is really the most basic thing is the families, right? The friends around you. I have a good relationship with my parents, with my in-laws. That's really enough. When things are getting very, very complicated, I try to scale back to think about the most basic things in human life. That is something I will teach my kids.
Did your parents have a big impact on you in terms of your career path and what you're doing now?
My dad is a mechanical engineer, and when I chose my major, he said never choose engineer. But I think I have the passion and genetics being an engineer. I just love problem solving, finding new solutions. That's just who I am. My parents never really suggest me to do anything. They just suggest me to not do anything, not to do engineer. The name of this podcast series is what I think. But if I ask my parents, they will say, well, what do you think doesn't matter, right? Just do the right thing. So I think my parents told me good fundamental values, loving your family, loving your kids, pay it forward, all those basic things. I think if I can teach the same things to my kids, they should be good, because if I teach them to love myself and my wife, I think in the long run, it will do benefit to us.
How much of your father's impact was telling you versus your own observations and reflection?
I think 95% is my own observation. My father is an entrepreneur and he started multiple businesses. None of them is like Alibaba or anything, not even close, right? It's very small businesses. But he is a hustler. He moved to Canada about 5 years ago without knowing how to speak English or French. And he moved to Quebec, which is a French-speaking region. And he survived with my mom, and they started a business, and they also sold that business. It's unbelievable to me. I don't know how they did it, and they knew nobody there. I'm in Ontario, so I did not see them frequently. So they just bought a business with their savings. They ran it and turned it profitable without learning the language. It's certainly not easy. I know it's not easy because I have not been in their shoes. The only thing I know is that it's not easy, but I don't know how hard it is. So I cannot imagine what they have been through, but just knowing that it's very hard and they're doing it for themselves and for us, that's enough for me to just work hard and teach my kids well.
All right. What I'd like to do is ask you to make one prediction about the future. It can be as wild as you want it to be. It can be specifically about artificial intelligence, but it can be any prediction about the future.
Yeah, I think there's going to be another DeepSeek coming out. It may not be from China. I don't know where it is from, but DeepSeek allows people to see what is possible. And I think people are finding ways to make things much cheaper. That would be my prediction. Again, I think it's good for consumers. I personally don't want to see just one single company like OpenAI being dominating everything. So that's my guess. And that's also my hope.
Awesome. It's been an awesome chat with you. I've enjoyed learning more about AI, but also yourself as well, and hope to have you back.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to seeing your movies in the theater.
Love it. Yeah, so I hope everyone will subscribe to the channel. It's called What I Think, and there'll be many more episodes like this one. All right, we'll see you in a few.